This is Monocle on Design Extra. It's a short show to accompany our weekly programme where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Maylee Evans. For the final time this week, we head to Dubai to close this programme's coverage of the city's recent Design Week. As part of this year's edition, the Ethiopian designer and architectural researcher Miriam Hillawi Abraham presented the installation Material Witnesses and Narrating Lifeforms. This project was inspired by the coral stone used as a construction material on the East African coast and in the Gulf. Nestled within a false coral stone wall, smaller coral replicas made from locally sourced beeswax and tulle melt under the harsh sunlight. The project is also in keeping with Miriam's use of natural materials, which previously have included salt, featured at the Sharjah Triennale. Monocle's design editor Nick Manise caught up with Miriam at the installation to discuss some of the challenges with working alongside a living, breathing material that may not behave as you expect, and to find out about this new strand of thinking in her practice.
This is like a new sort of line of inquiry in my work where I'm thinking of researching what I consider living materials, and living in the sense of breathing, like organic materials that are responsive to our presence, but also in the sense of mythical presence or mythical livingness, that we like endow like potency in these things like salt and like honey, and we endow things like healing in the idea of healing, the idea of ritual practice, and then the historical trait that connects different regions to these materials. So originally my use of salt in Sharjah was to relate it through the Red Sea to Ethiopia, to Eritrea. And then in this case, I was really interested in coral stone, how it's used in the Gulf and areas of material scarcity. When merchants settled and they couldn't find rocks, they dove for coral. And now I'm realizing it's a much wider practice in the Swahili coast. And when I last visited Eritrea, Mazawa, in the port, that's when I was in 2018, when the border opened, is like the first time I saw it as like an adult. So I was like, oh, okay, like this is like a really interesting use of material, of a living material you have to kill in order to use. But you can no longer repair, because I'm always interested in this idea of like preservation, but also the act of repair in order to preserve a story. So you can't repair coral stone without doing more damage to the environment. So I was interested in like how does like that material bear witness? How does salt come in communion with that material? It's like a part 2 of that exploration. And then originally I wanted to embed, like these are wax figures of coral, and you can touch them. So this is like a mixture of soy and beeswax. So originally I wanted to like embed it into walls and then like over time let it melt and think about the story it tells through its absence. Life forms and materials that co-narrate with us. It's not just human.
In terms of like they develop and change and grow and absorb and like reflect their environments, or
humans like terraform the world, and we also tell histories about ourselves, right? So we're changing the world so another organism encounters us and so on, whereas like other things feel like they're living more lightly on Earth or with the Earth, whereas coral actually forms reefs and then it lives with its dead. Like the dead sits there and then they build more reefs, and so it's like changing the Earth to tell its story. The same with like phytoplankton, it oxidizes the Earth to make it livable for itself. They tell a story of their presence by like impacting the world. So I was interested in how coral tells a story with us, but mostly through that research. I was like playing with that idea of making these like facsimiles of a material I can no longer source, and trying to recreate it. Like there's a bit of like a material constraint because wax is also like super expensive, an environmental constraint because I was like convinced it would melt in this heat, but like
so it's holding up.
It's holding up, and I wanted it to melt originally, and then now I'm like, okay, I'm also enjoying that it's just like staying there.
Why are these living, moving materials, and can we work with coral while it's living, or?
I don't know. So I'm landlocked also. I'm interested in like understanding planetary existence outside of human domination over living things. Like how do we co-produce with non-human organisms? So that's just another aspect of my research that I'm now developing, trying to understand not necessarily just sustainability, but sustainability beyond this idea of the Anthropocene. And the Anthropocene is always also attributed as a blanket role for the whole world when only one portion of the world was responsible for the epoch we exist in. So how do we also break free from that definition that's like a colonial imposition? And then how do we also revisit past practices, immaterial knowledges that were perhaps interrupted or paused by colonialism, what they were doing by making these coral stone walls. So I really like that idea of like, how do I work with something that's living? It's a very new process. There's a lot of like hiccups and there's a lot of decay. There's a lot of like spillage. It's a new fun way for me to work, and I'm working a lot outside of the digital for the first time. It's like in the mess a lot.
Miriam Hillawi Abraham in conversation with Monocle's design editor, Nick Manise. That's all for this week, but if you're eager for more design stories, then listen to our main programme, Monocle on Design, airing on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. London time. Or if you prefer print, Monocle's November issue is a design special, so I really recommend you pick that up. It's available on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced by me, Maylee Evans. Thank you very much for listening.